The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello. Welcome to today's webinar on product development. Thank you guys all for joining us. My name is Alec Kirkman. I'm a volunteer at Bankers Without Borders. I'm a student at Georgetown University, and today I'll be facilitating the technical side of the webinar. The goal of today's session is to better ascertain how to develop flexible and responsive financial products. And this webinar is one of several that Bankers Without Borders will be hosting on the subject. Our featured presenters today are Jesse Marsden, J.D. Bergeron, and Guy Stewart. Jesse is a program manager for the Microcredit Summit campaign. In his role as Research and Operations Manager, he is responsible for developing and coordinating the overall strategy for reaching the campaign's second goal of helping 1 million families lift themselves out of poverty. Jesse brings 6 years of experience in working on major advocacy campaigns and events centered on issues such as hunger and poverty alleviation, emergency response, and U.S. immigration reform. Guy Stewart is the Executive Director of Microfinance Opportunities, a nonprofit organization that develops ideas and solutions to help the financial community better serve the poor. Before becoming Executive Director, Guy was a Senior Advisor to MFO and served as the Principal Investigator on 5 Financial Diaries studies, and as a project leader for the development of the Financial Capabilities Index web portal. J.D. Bergeron is the Director of TrueLift, a global initiative to renew focus on the pro-poor objective of microfinance. J.D. has worked in microfinance for 7 years, most recently as Senior Director of Social Performance at Kiva.org. He developed and executed Kiva's social performance strategy, completed more than 100 MFI social audits, and created a social performance scorecard and badge recognition system. Before I turn this over to Jesse, I'd like to briefly explain how we will be handling questions. You should see a window on your screen for the webinar that includes a box for typing a question and a button labeled Submit Question for sending your question once it's ready. During the presentation, please use the webinar window to submit any questions that you may have. We will address them during the Q&A break towards the end of the presentation. No question is too small, and we will answer all of your questions while time permits. All of our webinars are recorded and made available in your volunteer application under the My Learning tab. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jesse.
Great. Thank you, Alec. And thank you also to Bankers Without Borders for hosting this discussion, one that I think is very important. And I'd like also to thank my colleagues who are joining me today. I'd like to say they're really the experts on this, and for that reason, the campaign is very proud to be partnering with both TrueLift and Microfinance Opportunities here and in a number of other ways to advance some of our shared goals. And that really includes a strong belief that using data can very much help an institution to understand its clients, their preferences, their behaviors, and ultimately institutions can use the analysis of that data to make decisions about how to match the products and services they offer and the delivery channels through which they're offered to more effectively support a client's journey out of poverty. Before I go any further, I just wanted to ask those in the audience to use that question feature now if you would like to place a question in the box that's what is the key thing you want to come away from this webinar today? What's the key question you want answered? And go ahead and do that. I'll continue on, but feel free to put that question in the box there, and we'll try to gear our presentations to address those questions. So just the briefest background on the campaign, we were launched in 1997 in New York at the first Microcredit Summit and co-founded by Sam Daly Harris with John Hatch of Finca and, of course, Professor Yunus of Brimming Bank. The summit initiated the first of what became 2 goals, but that first one was a financial inclusion goal or an outreach goal, and that was to reach 100 million of the world's poorest families with microfinance services, and that included savings, insurance, credit, and some non-financial services that we tracked as well. Now, fast forward 10 years, and we're approaching the 2006 Global Summit, and in looking back, we see that the industry, based on the campaign's annual data collection from member practitioners, had really grown. It had grown from 13 million clients in 1997 to a point where the 100 million mark was going to be reached just after the 2006 summit. So there we relaunched our goal, raising the bar to 175 million of the poorest reached. But along with that, we had this realization that the industry was collectively coming to know that outreach alone or inclusion alone wasn't necessarily going to achieve the ultimate or underlying objective. And that was to use microfinance services to help make a major step forward in reducing severe poverty. So we added to that initial outreach goal an outcomes goal, if you will, and that was to help 100 million families lift themselves out of severe poverty. So coming up to now current, the campaign has launched a new strategy moving forward, tying together its existing programs and adding a few new areas as well. And this program centers around the decision by the campaign to make this second goal, this outcomes goal, our primary focus. So my role at the campaign has been in developing this strategy and now working to move forward what we're calling the 100 Million Project. And the 100 Million Project has 4 core objectives. And let's see, if I could get Alec, if you want to jump to the next slide for me. Great. So here you see the 100 million goal, and that's to help 100 million families lift themselves out of extreme poverty. And the 4 core objectives there really go to support that topic. And I think they also speak a lot to why the campaign is on today and why we feel this topic is so important. So just going through these briefly, building coalitions, achieving the 100 million goal is going to require collaborating among a lot of organizations with a wide range of areas of expertise. And we're developing initiatives now with organizations needed to help make that happen. And that includes microfinance opportunities and as well as Trulit, who are on today. And it's our desire that through these partnerships we can help share innovations in reaching the poor, develop deeper understanding about how practices like data use can help MFIs to develop more effective products, to make their delivery channels more accessible, and ultimately to be more successful in supporting their clients moving out of poverty. A keystone of the 100 Million Project is promoting the use at scale of cost-effective measurement tools, and whether that's poverty benchmarking or other data collection practices among practitioner organizations. Utilizing benchmarking tools and these other data collection practices on a regular basis, we feel can help institutions to strengthen their social performance as well as improve their financial performance by better targeting for clients, and can help inform how to develop these products and services to best meet their needs. And of course, with the theme today being about how to make that match between products and services that you provide and the client's needs, that's really at the core of what this measurement is about. But in terms of putting that into practice, I've gotten at that a little bit already, but just having the data isn't enough. The value of data and the value of measuring comes through when an MFI starts using that data to learn more about its clients, to learn more about their needs and how the MFI can meet those needs more effectively. The campaign through the 100 Million Project is and will be increasingly working to develop initiatives that both promote and directly support the adoption by practitioners of changes or new practices that best facilitate their clients moving out of poverty based on these lessons learned from measurement data and other data processes. That starts with opportunities like today to reach out to groups like Bankers Without Borders, volunteers, and others on this session to underscore the value and importance of data and data use. Coming to the last objective there, and really returning to the fact that the 100 million goal is pretty audacious, it's a big goal. It's going to require strong and dedicated coalition members, and the need, therefore, for building global commitment is essential. This is, in our view, best done not by asking existing actors in the industry to change from doing one thing in favor of another, but rather by finding and acting on opportunities to form new partnerships, to combine complementary activities, and to leverage existing work into outcomes that can be more far-reaching than could be achieved individually. And here the effort is really to recognize and facilitate this level of partnership across the whole of the ecosystem of microfinance with the aim to demonstrate the power of collaborative and creative effort applied to global scale problems. So with that, that's the background and the context of why the campaign's here and why we value this. We see the opportunities to use data to understand client needs and therefore make adjustments to your products and delivery channels as the right way to get to best meeting your clients' needs. And if you're meeting your clients' needs, we see that as going a long way towards helping to facilitate their movement out of poverty. So with that, I want to cut it off for me and turn it now over to JD from TrueLift. He's the director of TrueLift, and he's going to take us through their aims and the role that they can play in understanding the importance of using data to, as their model says, measure, learn, change. So with that, JD.
Thanks, Jesse, and thank you to Grameen Foundation and Bankers Without Borders for including me in this discussion. I would very much like to respond to questions, so thanks to those of you who have already sent those in. I think a discussion is much more interesting when we're able to answer directly. Alec, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. I'm not sure if I can do it. TrueLift was until very recently known, and for the past 3 years was known as the Seal of Excellence. So if you hadn't heard of TrueLift, it's because we have just completed our new naming. TrueLift is in intention trying to create something like a fair trade label, first for microfinance, but then for other development interventions that are aimed at reaching poor people. The idea is to create a trust mark that signifies commitment to positive and enduring change. That positive and enduring change is critical. We need to see people progressing, and we need to see that those changes actually remain over time. Studies are showing that a lot of people may be showing some improvements, perhaps even measurably, quote-unquote, moving out of poverty, but a big challenge comes along and they are right back where they started, sometimes worse off. This is to back up what Jesse was saying, why we are so committed to working on data-driven decision-making, and I'm going to explain how TrueLift is doing that. We have a very simple theory of change. Measure what you care about. This obviously is not our intellectual property. For years, the Social Performance Task Force and many of the more socially minded practitioners and other stakeholders in microfinance have been focusing on creating tools and data. Sorry, there's little messages popping up to me right now. We're focusing on data, trying to create the tools. One really good example is the Progress Out of Poverty Index from Grameen, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Today, we're talking about that movement from measure to learn. What are you able to learn from the data that's being collected? What were you expecting to see? Is the measurement proving ineffective? You don't know what you were hoping to know. All of these results lead to changes, and this is drawn as an arrow, but it really ought to be a circle, as a cycle. After you make changes, you need to define new measurements, new data points, and obviously not all of these changes, not all of the information that you're finding is going to be positive, and it's really important to build in a framework that constantly rewards innovation and movement towards better and better outcomes for the end clients we're trying to reach. One of the questions that was asked, which I think is a really important framework around TrueLift, is from Jessica Wong. She asked, what's happening in the microfinance sector now? What new innovations, what new opportunities? TrueLift is one of a number of initiatives that we're calling a responsible inclusive finance platform. This includes the SMART campaign for client protection. It includes the Social Performance Task Force, Microfinance Transparency, and others who are rigorously working to define standards in different areas, principles and standards and ways of measuring transparency in order to keep the challenges that microfinance has faced in recent years, specifically in the media, largely from Andhra Pradesh in India, but also in Morocco, Bolivia, Nicaragua, Bosnia. There are many places in the world where there have been some pretty significant challenges. We have to be really careful to create a proper framework for how microfinance can be done well in order to get to this endpoint. And I think microfinance really is ready, and Guy will talk more specifically about innovations that are being done in products and how to do that. But I think it is critical to note we are getting to a point where client focus is becoming the center of what all of us are discussing. And all of us today and a much larger industry supporting this really are trying to figure out how can we learn best, measuring directly from client access and making changes after that. So the TrueLift objective is based on 3 Pro-Core principles. These should not seem very surprising. In fact, we are trying really hard to keep a very simple framework. The first is purposeful outreach to people living in poverty. The question often comes up, is it okay to just reach poor people? You don't really measure it, you don't know, it's a net good to just reach people who are poor. We're stating that it actually has to be part of the intent and strategy in order to come together in a positive way for the people at the end point. I would like to point out that a lot of the concepts that we're struggling with, specifically at TrueLift, are not new. This is basic good customer service. And while maybe the business sectors, the financial sectors, a lot of the very successful corporations in the world already know that figuring out who your customer is, reaching them and giving them what they want is a key to success. Microfinance is really coming around to implementing this same framework for itself. So that leads into our second principle and very much the focus of today's discussion. Products, services, delivery channels, human resource decisions. We often talk in terms of products, but it really is all aspects of a microfinance institution's work need to be adapted to the needs of people living in poverty. One of the best examples I can think of right now from hundreds of MFIs I interacted with at Kiva is really hiring the right loan officers who will be able to not only get access to the clients you're trying to reach, but be accepted by them. Decisions on hiring people with local language skills or people who are women versus men, because maybe women will have better access to the clients you're trying to reach. These are all really important decisions. We do focus quite a bit on products and services because really those are the tools that we're trying to provide to help people move towards positive and enduring change. But it is important to note that there's a broader scope here as well. The third change, the third principle we're working on, and this is probably the weakest one in the industry today, tracking progress of these same clients. So disaggregating your data by poverty level of the people involved and actually having a way, a rigorous way to track progress over time. I would imagine that the next few years will show the emergence of new tools for this particular area. For now, we are embracing whatever tools that an organization has chosen to use. Does it match with their theory of change, and does it actually show the information that they're hoping for with enough rigor, with enough consistency of collecting information? I want to point out also there was a really good question from Josh Ling who asked, what's the value for clients and how do you design products to provide that? One of the really interesting parts of the discussion for TrueLift when we were coming up with our principles, which of course have a set of supporting indicators, was we really wanted to flip this discussion. So number 2, the focus about products and services, what we really are looking at is what are the needs of people living in poverty, and not just generally speaking, but in the area that an MFI is choosing to intervene. What are the specific things that people are challenged with? Are they struggling with financing for starting up a new business? Are they struggling with financing for expanding an existing business? Are they dealing with drought and natural challenges that are making their crops fail? Are there health issues that are quite regular and consistent? Some of these things really are universal. This to me answers or speaks to the question of value. It's often a give and take, a balancing act we have to find between needs that we know exist, whether or not the clients are clamoring for them, and perhaps things that they are asking for that really are something that have to be built up to. In my travels in visiting some small nonprofit microfinance institutions throughout the world, something I've seen quite commonly is a demand for housing loan products. And the question is, obviously a house, when you build a house, it does not generally generate revenue to repay the loan. So the question is, would a better tool for helping people improve their home or build a home be some sort of directed savings account that builds on an existing business as opposed to creating a large debt cycle based on that? I'm going to go to the next slide now, but that's the essential framework: reaching poor people, giving them what they need, and tracking progress over time. Some people have asked, well, what does this really look like in action? I'm speaking specifically to what would a pro-poor, effective microfinance institution look like in proving that they are able to provide products and services that meet the needs. So they would be able to, one, know who among their clients are poor and appropriate to that particular country or region's poverty levels. Perhaps they even need to disaggregate between poverty levels. As we all know, there is sort of a category of near poor. There's a category of very poor, the poorest. Some of these standards differ from different places around the world, but knowing who you're trying to reach and actually disaggregating the information so that you can speak to different marketing contingencies separately. You need to study the needs. You need to understand the constraints of these specific poor clients. And as I said, creating segments that make sense, which are not too small to be effective and efficient, but really speaking to the needs that you are seeing in the field. Often loan officers know these things intuitively, and often that information unfortunately doesn't get high up enough in the MFI to do much good in developing new products and services. I think it's also really critical to design and test services specifically for these clients. Are you looking at the uptake on a particular agricultural loan compared to the specific clients you're trying to reach? Perhaps the product you've just developed is very, very desirable for a less poor client group, which maybe is a decision to continue serving that client group, but you need to tailor the design to reach the groups that you really are aiming to serve and help. You need to adjust regularly. I think one of the challenges in microfinance specifically is there is no reward mechanism for failure. When a product is designed and it's not taken up quickly or the repayment rate is poor, it's often cast aside as opposed to adjusted in order to figure out ways for it to be more effective. A really good example, I think, in recent years, there's been a lot of focus on the grace period, the initial grace period for the first payment after a client gets a new loan. While conventional wisdom said the sooner you get people repaying, the more likely they are going to stay rigorous in their repayment and stay non-delinquent. I think there have been some tests, and some early findings are very encouraging that giving a grace period that matches the income cycle of the particular client can be even more effective. A really simple example, going back to farmers taking loans. Traditional loans would require that farmer to start paying back a month after getting their loan, or even a few weeks when they've just planted seeds in the ground. A more logical grace period would have them doing a bullet payment when their first crop comes to market, they've harvested, and they can actually afford to pay back. I think it is a really big challenge for MFIs to learn from their clients what they need and want, and to sift through those needs and wants to figure out what is the MFI capable of providing right here and now, what partnerships are necessary in the future to fulfill other needs. It is quite common for MFIs to be legally unable to collect savings. However, they could develop a partnership with a regulated bank in order to facilitate savings for their clients if that were one of the demands. What is in it for microfinance providers, for MFIs? TrueLift is intending, as I said, to create a balancing incentive. The financial side is already well established. A successful product will bring in more profitability, will bring in new clients, will be very attractive. The MFI's numbers will look really good. The financial status of the MFI will attract donors and investors. However, TrueLift really does need to create the balance on the other side. Sometimes this trial and error, this innovation cycle, can be very expensive and very challenging. So TrueLift is trying to create almost a social reward. The idea is to recognize MFIs that are on a path towards very effective support of people living in poverty. So TrueLift will validate their work. TrueLift provides indicators not just for assessment but also for strategic planning purposes. By creating a community of practice, TrueLift is bringing together pro-poor practitioners, those who are showing very effective results and practices will be able to share their best ideas with MFIs from across the world, and those who are struggling can ask questions of that community. Also, I think it is very challenging for an emerging microfinance provider, one that is perhaps not quite yet to financial sustainability but is intensely dedicated to its poor clients. TrueLift will be a way to highlight them earlier in that process when they really do need that intervention of technical assistance, of new investment, new donations, just even new supporters. There are many, many examples of microfinance institutions in the world today who really have maintained a razor-sharp focus on their poor clients and creating positive change, but they are not yet reaching the kinds of supporters they need because of there's no current system except for looking at financial numbers. It is a pathway. There is progress to be made throughout TrueLift, and I'm giving this information so that you understand that there is a journey to be had here, and we generally judge based on results and endpoints, and TrueLift is trying to create a complementary system here that will allow organizations to find support earlier on, joining the community of practice, making a firm commitment. We are an organization that wants to serve poor people, create positive and enduring change. An aspirant would be we only want to do this. We are trying to get good, and we are ready to have our practices evaluated. An emerging practitioner is showing some promise in some of the necessary areas, but not all, and really needs help. We imagine that this is going to be one of the larger areas of membership, MFIs that get recognized at the emerging level. Achiever level would be high marks in pro-poor microfinance. They're doing very well across the board. They're missing just a few of the indicators that TrueLift is based upon. And then the leader level, the very top. We've retained that Seal of Excellence name as the way to recognize this leader level. They have high marks on all areas, all requirements, and our hope is that they will become leaders and mentors within the community of practice to help other organizations come along. That is the essential start. I am going to hand this over to Guy now, and I will review your questions and be ready to answer them when it gets around to the question and answer section. So thanks very much.
Great. This is Guy Stewart from Microfinance Opportunities. Thank you, Bankers Without Borders, Grameen Foundation, for including me in this presentation. So I'm going to talk about the role of data in developing pro-poor products and services in the financial sector. I just want to back up a little, talk a little bit about microfinance opportunities and the work that we do, because it's relevant to this, of course. Our focus is on consumers, on clients, and we have two sets of activities, consumer research and consumer education. So we have a thriving practice in helping financial service providers and other organizations to develop curricula, training modules, content to train low-income people or to provide education to low-income people around issues of money management and financial service use. We always in our work begin with where the consumer is at themselves. We understand that they manage money in particular ways because of the circumstances in which they face, and we take into account those circumstances, and our goal is to provide them with tools that they can use to improve their lives. On the consumer research side, of course, we do a lot of research to inform our education practice, but we also have a more general research activities. A lot of the work that we've been doing has been in financial diaries. Some of you may be familiar with Stuart Rutherford's book, The Poor and Their Money, and then the follow-up book, Portfolios of the Poor, that was written with some other authors. If you've read those books, you will know that financial diaries provide a very micro-level view of the financial lives of low-income people. In the diaries work that I do, we ask people questions weekly. What did you buy? What did you sell? What did you borrow? What did you save? What gifts were you given? What gifts did you receive? And we get a transaction-by-transaction account of their activities. And this gives us a real insight into their lives and into their money management and challenges. So with that in mind, when I was approached to contribute to this webinar, I was asked about our work in focused on data and focused on how data can promote financial inclusion through the appropriate delivery of appropriate products. So let me just go to the next slide, if we can. Hello. Thank you. So in terms of the role that data can play in ensuring appropriate delivery of services to low-income consumers, there are basically, in my mind, two frameworks that we can think about. One is a traditional performance management framework. Those of you who have attended business school or a public policy school should be familiar with the notion of performance management, where you identify key performance indices and then you generate, capture and report out on those indices, and then you manage against those indices. So you may, for example, have as one of your indices a default rate of a particular, on a credit institution, a default rate of a particular level. And you obviously capture information about that indicator, and you might have that at the branch level for different branch managers. And if you see, for example, the default rate going up in a particular branch, you provide feedback to that branch manager. You may provide them with additional training that they can then pass on to their loan officers. And of course, you're also continuously evaluating them against those indices, and even providing incentives to ensure that they meet the target levels that you've set for them. And that's a data-driven process, and it requires a lot of feedback loops. An alternative, or not an alternative, a second framework for thinking about the role of data in providing appropriate services is this new interest in big data. And the basic idea is that there is a ton of information within the management information systems of microfinance institutions and banks, and those data are not being looked at, exploited, or used. And that there's a huge opportunity to analyze those data and come up with new products, new service offerings that better suit customers. And what you want to do when you use a big data approach to decision making is that you run the data through algorithms that enable you to identify emergent patterns. In my own work, we focus on transaction sequences, on networks of relations, and on spatial distribution of customer activity, and look for patterns in those. And what you're trying to do is use these data to predict customer behavior and improve your service offerings as a result. So these are two sort of frameworks that we're trying to use at Microfinance Opportunities to inform the work of banks and MFIs. Next slide, please. So just some examples on the performance management side of things. As JD from TrueLift said earlier, when we're thinking about products and services for low-income populations in the financial sector, often people do talk about product design, product development, etc. And the phraseology leads you to think about the parameters of a product, the interest rate, the term, the installment cycle, etc. And I mean, those are important parameters, but they're not the whole story. And as JD pointed out, there's lots of other things that go on within an organization and within the interface between the customer and the organization that that matter a lot and can make a huge difference as to whether any particular product and service delivery system works. One example of that is a lot of microfinance, whether it's on the credit side or on the savings side or the insurance side or even on the remittances side, you're relying on frontline employees who you give certain incentives to for performing. And oddly enough, when you look out into the world of microfinance and banking targeted at low-income people, you actually find that there's a lot of mismatches between the incentives provided to frontline employees and to there are a lot of incentives provided to those people that don't align well with the organization's business model. We're working right now with an organization that is a savings bank, and its focus is on helping mobilize savings. And what we found by looking at their data is that they are opening a lot of savings accounts. So they are generating a lot of new customers. But those new customers open accounts and then they never use them. And the incentives that they provide their sales staff is that they give them a certain amount of money for each account that's opened. But that's it. That's the only incentive. There's no incentive for opening an account and then seeing it being used. And yet the bank has an interest in, and part of its business model is built around not only the opening of an account on which they lose money, but the use of the account and, of course, the building up of balances on that account. So clearly there's a problem here. And if you put in place, I mean, first of all, there's some simple analysis to be done of the data. But if you put in place some performance management principles which sought to create some indicators that aligned the performance of the frontline staff with the core business model of the organization, you'd be in a much better position as an organization to provide appropriate products. You do not want clients opening accounts and then not using them. Client retention is another very important part of providing good service to clients. I know obviously clients' needs evolve and sometimes they graduate from your organization, but a lot of times it's a matter of the organization losing touch with the client. And again, you could put in place some indicators around retention at the branch level and manage against those. That's another example of using performance management. And again, it's not about the product design, it's not about the parameters of the product, but it's about the service delivery systems you put in place and the management of those service delivery systems. And of course, underlying a lot of these sorts of activities, you want to be looking at comparing employees against each other, comparing branches against each other, so you can have cross-learning and improvement of the organization overall. We go to the next slide. If you think about the big data approach to using data to improve your service to clients, right now, in fact, just this morning, I was on a long Skype call with an analyst who we're working with, who's developing a predictive model for us for a bank that is finding that many of its savings accounts are going dormant. And so we've got a data dump of millions of transactions from the bank and their account level data, and we're building a predictive model to be able to predict when someone is in danger of going dormant. And that's simply based on their past transactions behavior relative to the bank. There's a lot of work going on in using mobile voice, text, and money transfer data to predict creditworthiness at the microcredit level. The latest and most dramatic example of this is the M-Shwari product in Kenya, where Safaricom has teamed up with a bank in Kenya, and is essentially they're using the voice data, text data, and money transfer data from Safaricom to inform the credit decisions of the bank, and people are able to borrow money, and not only borrow money from the bank, but borrow from the bank through the phone. The reason why there's a lot of activity around the mobile data is because that is the most ubiquitous way in which low-income people in developing countries touch formal systems that are able to capture data. Mobile phone penetration rates are extremely high in developing countries, and so there's a lot of data about how people's phone patterns, and just like there is in the US, and there's a lot of data to be mined there. And so that's something that's happening and will continue to happen. Next slide, please. There's a challenges, though, in doing all of this. There's a challenge in management capacity, and it's particularly in performance management that requires systems changes. It requires you actually manage against indices, and that you provide, as a manager, provide feedback and training to your employees on an ongoing basis, and that you have systems in place to do that feedback, and that people are constantly paying attention to the reports that are coming in. That all requires management capacity and management training. You have to, of course, have IT department capacity, whether you're doing big data or performance management. And then, of course, you have to have good data. Our experience is that transactions data is very good because it feeds right into the core of a bank or MFI's business, which is managing financial transactions. But accounts data, beyond the account number and the name of the person and some sort of ID that enables you to uniquely identify someone, beyond that, accounts data can be very spotty. The gender of, if you want, the gender of the person, or their physical address, or even their mobile phone number, you can run into lots of problems with the data. So data quality can be a challenge. And just to give you a very simple example, if your data lack good mobile phone numbers for your customers, then that hampers your ability to serve them well. You cannot, if you think they're in danger of going dormant, you can't give them a call to touch base with them to see what's going on. If they're late on a payment, you can't call them to talk to them about that. If you want to survey them to identify whether a particular product might be useful to them, you can't do that. Something as simple as having good mobile number data in your database can be extraordinarily important. So those are the challenges. So let's go to the next slide. So performance management has been around for a long time. Big data has sort of gotten headline news in the last few years. And so big data is the new sexy thing. Performance management is kind of the old fuddy-duddy type of work. And if you think about the two, one of the things that has struck me as in thinking about these two frameworks is that, especially in a developing country context, it turns out that the new trendy sexy thing is actually in some ways the easier one to do, because with the big data project, you can simply ask the IT department to dump text files into a Dropbox folder somewhere in the US or in Europe where the analysts sit. Those analysts can write the algorithms and crunch the data, and they can send back a neatly packaged answer to the particular question that the bank or MFI wanted answered. On the other hand, performance management requires management meeting to identify the key performance indices, developing the data capture mechanisms to capture the key performance indices that management has decided on. You need to generate usable reports that management can read easily and make decisions about. And then you need to ensure that management engages in feedback and action based on the reports, and training and evaluation. And all of this requires a lot of work within the bank or the MFI. And it's really good work, it's important work, it's critical work, but it's hard work, and it requires systems changes. And so one of the interesting things that I'm running up against is I think that there's a huge need for performance management within banks and MFIs across the world. That there's just the simple principles of identifying indicators that really matter to you and managing against those indicators in an effective manner is critical, and it's not being done. And yet, when people look at that compared to, say, doing a big data project, the big data looks much easier. So one of the things that we have to be careful of as we try to promote data-driven decision-making is that we don't obscure the need for systems changes and management changes by going to the new sexy thing of big data. Now, I do both, and I'm interested in both, but I see different roles for them. And to put it more starkly, one way of thinking about this is that performance management is about the empowerment of the management of the organization. Big data is simply about processing and analyzing some data and giving those managers an answer. And it's not as empowering. So just thought I'd leave you with that final thought as a way to give you a sense of some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that we face with a more data-driven approach to financial inclusion. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And I guess with that, I will pass the microphone to Jesse so that he can lead the questions and answer portion of this.
Yes, and as JD just mentioned, some really great questions coming in. Keep them coming as we go along here. We're going to stay on. I've been told by Alec that we can borrow a little time past 1, so I think we're going to intrude on his hospitality and make that happen. I wanted to start off, while some other questions are still coming in, to point to a couple for JD and a couple for Guy, just to get things started. Guy, there were 2 that came in from Heather Arney, some good questions. One, how do we go about identifying some of these key performance indicators that you had mentioned? And then another one that I thought was very interesting in regards to the mobile voice. What are the privacy concerns that come up there? So let me jump back to Guy for one more, since those were both from Heather. There was one on the role of technology in supporting what you're doing with data collection, and that was from 2 people actually, Benjamin Brennan and Kuruvilla Abraham. And so let me leave you with those. And JD, there were 2 really good ones. One, if you might take just a moment to lay the context for how TrueLift fits in with SMART and with SPTF. And then secondly, that question came from Mallory Forsyth. And then there was one from Kiera Ball, And that was about those who are for-profit institutions. Maybe they don't have as deeply seated a social mission, or they're trying to balance that social mission with financial performance. You know, how do they fit in with the TrueLift model? And I think you got at that a little bit, but I think it bears repeating. So, Guy, let me have you go first, and JD, come on back then when you're ready.
So, I mean, the answer around choosing KPIs, key performance indices, I mean, of course, it depends the type of organization you are. We should remember that a lot of the organizations out there in the microfinance space are doing much more than credit these days. And in fact, there's lots of evidence to suggest that low-income people need savings services. And insurance and remittance services, and less so credit. And so, of course, what you're providing is going to be driving your indicators. I mean, more generally, then this speaks to the whole issue of the empowerment, is that you should be working with management and identifying with management what they see as the indicators that they should be relying on to drive their business well. And there is a role for outside consultants and outside experts to help drive that process, but it has to come from management themselves. And because they know their business best and they understand it best. The role for outside consultants is not only to facilitate the process of making those decisions, but also to provide a fresh set of data from consumers about what consumers need. And what you want to do is align the needs of consumers with the operations of the organization and the indicators that the organizations could be managed against. It's a pretty generic answer, but that's really in the end what it's about. In terms of the phone stuff, I mean the voice data. That's an interesting question. Of course, if you're I don't know the Mshwari model inside out, so I don't know who's actually running the algorithm on the data. But my bet is that Safaricom is holding on to the voice data, and those voice data are being processed either internally by themselves or by a consultant with an algorithm. That consultant doesn't need to know the identity of the mobile phone user. As long as they have some sort of unique identifier that can be traced back to the user, then that's fine. So that entity doesn't need to know the identity of the mobile phone users. And then the question is, well, what data gets to the bank? Well, if you're just giving the bank a score, in some ways you are providing additional information to that bank that they wouldn't otherwise have had, but you're not actually providing them with any data about their phone calls. You're simply providing data about what their phone call says about them. Now, that can become quite detailed because you can learn a lot about people from their phone calls. So there's our privacy issues there. But the mobile provider is not giving this data out to anyone. They're giving it out to particular partners, and they're also giving it out about people who have signed up for the service. And one would assume that, and this is something, again, I don't know because I haven't signed up for Mshwari, but at some point there would be some information about the sharing of that data, just as you have information that gets sent to you on a regular basis by a bank in the US telling you what data is being shared. But that's something that really does need to be looked at more carefully. The final question, the role of technology, I think that was a general question. We've done a lot of work on branchless banking and the use of mobile phones to help manage financial transactions. And what we've seen and what the data from surveys have shown is there are a lot of deployments trying to use mobile phones to provide financial services, and very few of them are successful. Very few of them are going to scale. And I think that they will go to scale eventually, but I think that people have underestimated significantly the problems of going to scale with a mobile money platform to provide financial services. There are a lot of moving parts. Actually, in our office at MFO, we have a whiteboard with a list of all the elements you need in order to have a successful mobile money and strategy, and the list goes to 20 or 30 fairly high-level elements. So technology will have a role, does have a role, but it's got a long way to go.
Thanks. JD.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm going to answer a few questions in a row as well. The question was about the relationship between Smart Campaign and their client protection principles, the Social Performance Task Force and their universal standards for social performance management, and TrueLift, and how does this all work together. The good news is that we have been working very closely with both of those initiatives as well as a number of others, including Microfinance, Transparency, Mixed Market, Cerise, etc. Our framework is built entirely on those existing principles and standards. We have simply added, we like to call it a lens of poverty, focused a lens of poverty on these existing frameworks. So as an example, the universal standards already includes a system for, standard number 4 is about services and products that meet the needs of clients, or appropriate products. That matches the Smart Campaign's principle, which is an avoidance of products that cause harm or are particularly ineffective in some way or other. Both of these initiatives are represented on our steering committee and have been working really hard to make sure that this very complicated framework that starts to emerge when you try to take in client protection, social performance management, and now TrueLift, to make sure that it is quite simple. All three can be delivered through the standard social audit and social rating products. So the good news is that there are tools being developed to keep up with these initiatives. We really are working very hard as an industry group, a working group, to make sure that MFIs can react to the information that's being shared in an effective way. A second question was about do for-profit MFIs with perhaps a more secondary social intention, are they at all compelled by what TrueLift is about? We are still in our early stages, but we did work throughout our alpha and beta testing phase with very diverse MFIs, not just social first or poverty focused MFIs. And I believe that a reward system, because there are very few ways for an MFI to distinguish itself, that this reward system is in fact compelling to both small, socially minded, large, not so socially minded organizations. I lean on my experience at Kiva. We created an online badging system, very simple social performance badges, an award for MFIs who meet certain criteria. They immediately took to competing with their partner MFIs or related MFIs within country. If one of them got 4 and the other one only got 3, they wanted to know exactly what it would take for them to get the same social performance badge. We think that TrueLift is going to work very much the same. We have already a growing list of MFIs that would like to be assessed. They're not all small NGOs. So to me, the for-profit question is not the focus. Really, the question is, will enough MFIs want to be identified as poverty-focused, because it is a challenging mission, and the tools are still being developed. We hope that this actually will create a renewed focus on reaching poor clients and measurably interacting with them over time. Third question was from Nikita, and that asked, the question was whether there are any indicators developed for institutions who provide savings to low-income people, and the answer is yes. Our framework is intentionally set up to work with not just credit, but savings, insurance, whatever the MFI has put forward. Remember, we're starting from client needs, so if the MFI has chosen to offer savings as a way to perhaps get more kids into higher education, or perhaps to help with saving up for medical emergencies, can they show data and information that this is in fact meeting the need that clients have put forth, and that they are reacting, making changes, making edits? In some ways, we're paying closer attention to whether there are adaptations in the products and the work of the MFI than the results. The results are critical, but until you can prove out the results, really the best way to see the MFI is responsive is to track, these small tweaks in their products and services and changes in decisions based on information that they've collected. I'll give it back to Jesse now.
Great, thanks, JD. Guy, I had two questions for you. One is, and Guy, please feel free to interject other questions that you may have seen too. But one is from Bram Stoffel from Children and Youth Finance International. He was asking about what are some of the key considerations in specifically addressing products for youth and children. And I thought that was an interesting question. How does the data set differ perhaps for looking at that group? The next question is Naveed Somani on the role of open data platforms and how they can help MFIs compare their performance to each other and learn from each other. And actually, if both JD and Guy could respond to that question, I think that'd be good. Go ahead, Guy.
Sure. I'm going to plead ignorance on children. I don't know much about that, but on youth, and when we talk about youth, we're talking now about a fairly wide range of people from around 15 all the way up to 35 in some cases. And what's critical about youth is that they're going through a lot of life transitions. They're leaving school, if they've attended school, and increasingly young people, kids are attending school in developing countries. They're leaving school, they're still at home, but they may be looking for a job. They may start with some part-time work, and they're first getting their own money, but they're also within a household, and that household makes demands on the money that they earn, and there's issues around their control of their money. They are looking, there's the next transition is potentially marriage and then children. And so there's a lot of dynamics there. And so one of the things that's important to pay attention to with youth is their changing life status, life situation, and how an MFI can be responsive to that. And so that's where I think it's important to keep track of, and how you might look at youth slightly differently from more established adults who have gone through a lot of these transitions. The second thing with youth is in some parts of the world, the penetration rates for youth, especially in their 20s, in terms of mobile phones, is extraordinarily high and higher than the older adults. And so there's potentially different ways of reaching them, different channels to reach them, both with information but also with actual services. So those would be the considerations I would keep in mind with youth. In terms of open data platforms, I don't know if you have a particular platform in mind. As far as I know, the open data platforms that are out there are mostly, or the platforms that are out there are mostly sharing sort of aggregated data. Actually, we just got news today of received some funding to convene a group of nonprofits that are interested in more granular transactions data and whether we can actually set up a platform whereby MFIs and banks share their information with that platform, have it run through an algorithm, and then have it spit back to them in terms of reports, but also have the nonprofits also have access to those reports and identify places where the nonprofits and the banks can work together to improve performance and actually go from sort of a big data data mining approach to data back into a performance management approach to data. So I think there are opportunities there, and it's something that I will be working on over the next few months. So keep your ears open. Over to you, Jesse.
Great. Great, thanks. JD, I just wanted to know if there's any connections that TrueLift might see with big data platforms in the future.
This is always going to be a challenge. Mixed market, many of you will know, has been trying to be a platform and a sort of the platform for information to be shared. I agree with Guy that it tends to be aggregated information, and many MFIs get a little bit protective of their information when it is more specific than that. Our hope in TrueLift is that the community of practice will create a closed environment where MFIs will share their good practices and be willing to ask their bigger challenges because it's a closed loop. But yeah, it is something that is going to be a bigger and bigger part of this. Smart Campaign, I think, has already achieved some success collecting specific information, writing case studies, but a more generalized open data platform is probably going to be a while before the industry's ready.
Understood. I think we can take one more question, and I'm sorry, I just scrolled past it. I wanted to ask one from Inez Aravelo, and I'm going to read the question because it's a good one, I think. We're already collecting feedback from clients and often hear what from them. We want larger loans at lower interest rates. How can we move beyond these statements to truly identify the product features that would better respond to their needs? And also, how can we distinguish between needs and wants? And Guy, I wanted to look to you for this question. You know, how do you advise an MFI to be able to move past that kind of feedback into something that might be a little more actionable, operational, and that sort of thing?
It's a really good question, because on the one hand you want to respect the voice of the consumer. On the other hand, you want to be careful as to how you interpret that and try to read behind the statements a bit more. So it's a great question. I mean, just a couple of examples of things I've come across. One is a bank we worked with and ran through their data. One of the things that I saw when analyzing the data was the fact that when you saw an individual pay off a loan successfully, and then they got a new, much bigger loan, and they got into trouble very quickly, and that was very clear from the data and raised some red flags. And I think this is not an uncommon story. The second one is we're dealing with a bank that actually doesn't offer credit and is limited in its ability to offer credit by its charter. And yet its customers are asking for credit. But it's unclear as to whether they want credit because they actually need it or because they want to have the option to use it. And so there's a couple of approaches to this, and let's take this particular scenario of higher loan amounts, lower credit. There's the age-old principle of step lending where you gradually increase people's loan limits, and that provides you with a lot of data about where the stress points become clear. And there's no reason why that step lending approach could not happen. A second one is so that's one approach of generating good data about the question on the table. The second one is people may express a particular need for a particular loan size, and they may be offered that loan size. But it then becomes an opportunity to have a conversation about whether they can afford the loan, what is it they're going to use it for, what is it that they really need. And almost if you take, so another option is that you actually do increase your loan limits, but you beef up your underwriting and you beef up your training of loan officers in terms of engaging clients who are looking to go to a higher level than the MFI is used to going, and engaging people around that. Because in the end, you're never going to know whether clients' needs and wants are, what the difference is until you've tested it. And so the question really is how do you open yourself up to the conversation with the client without, of course, undermining both the client's viability and your own viability as an organization. Over to you, Jess.
Great, thanks. And with that, I'd like to point to JD's message that please feel free to submit questions to info@truelift.org. One other thing, there's a lot of really great questions that we didn't get to answer, and if yours was one of those, or if you think of a question that you'd like to ask, we're going to be posting, the campaign will be posting to our blog, 100millionideas.org, that's 100millionideas.org, a blog post about this session. And in that we have a discussion features. Thank you, JD. He just posted that to the chat so you can see it. We'll look forward to continuing the discussion there if you'd like. So if your question was one of the ones that didn't get asked or answered, please feel free to ask it again. If you come up with another question that you'd like to ask, post it there, and we'll take this discussion on further. The next thing I'd like to do is ask Alec if he could just let us know if there's going to be an offline version of this webinar available. I know it was being recorded, and where we can access that. With that, thank you all for your participation today. This was a great discussion from our point of view with the number of questions that came in, the depth of those questions, and so I hope that we were able to answer those in ways that help you out. So with that, Alec, I'll turn it back to you.
Hey, perfect. Thank you so much. I'd just like to say, again, on behalf of Grameen Foundation, thank you guys. There's obviously a lot of talent and a lot of passion behind everything that you guys do. So I'd like to thank JD from TrueLift, Guy from Microfinance Opportunities, and Jesse from Microcredit Summit Campaign for giving this unique insight into the field. As far as an offline version of this, yeah, it will be available on Bankers Without Borders, the website. It should be up within the next week or so. So look for that if you would like to relive this. But again, thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
And with that,
we're done.
yeah.
anything we need to wrap up or just sign out?
No, but again, thank you guys. I think we should be good. I just got to figure out how to close out of this guy.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and it was a real pleasure, and we had a good turnout.
Yeah, excellent. I'm excited. We hit the max attendance a couple of times, so
yeah,
good.
That was really good.
Yeah. All righty. Thank you guys. Have a good one.
All right. Take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care.
Thank you, Alec. Bye-bye.